Deus Ex Machina was released in 1984 by Automata UK.
Deus Ex Machina.
This is the playthrough. It's a Spectrum thing. It came
Deus Ex Machina.
Let me just.
Hello. I want.
It sounds so good because it came as a cassette which you loaded the game from and a cassette which you played the audio from, and they synced exactly to each other. So you have this beautiful sort of multi-sensory experience in a time where, you know, all we were used to is 8-bit blips and clicks.
You to pause your player when I count you down
All these cool actors.
and recommence playing at the screen's request. 5, 4, 3,
Mouse and joystick.
2, 1, pause. Tuesday evening, after tea and compulsory prayers, the last mouse on earth tried to hide from mankind inside the machine. Just before it died, as the nerve gas eased its sphincter, the last ever mouse dropping caused a slight accident. You may control the progress of this accident on my behalf, and with my permission, and lead it up the telepath.
So what's key there is it's frame the player. You can control this on my behalf and frame this. So that's quite interesting. Back then they've contextualized your involvement here. And actually, it leads up to a series of mini games.
She sing in Norton spirals, which must not stop spinning.
So the soundtrack's incredible, but effectively what you're doing is, it's told in several acts. What you're trying to do initially is to make this human which has been born within the machine as human as possible, as the machine is trying to make it as mechanical as possible. And the outcome of your first, after the baby is born, how you've interacted there impacts how your character moves on the second stage, which is sort of quite nice. So even though the story is very fixed, it's all about the birth, life and death of this future baby which was born in the machine. You are sort of actively shaping it. And I just think the whole thing's very beautiful. I just think it looks great, and it's 30 years old now, which I think is great. So I always think, I often go to a lot, you go to a lot of conferences and people sort of say, well, the reason storytelling isn't very good in games because it's still in its infancy. But when I look at things 30 years ago delivering on this quality, I sort of think it's a little bit of a poor argument. The other one, which let's have a look and see what's next to my presentation slide, and then I'll see if I've got. So the next thing I'm going to show is Bad Day on the Midway, which is a game from 1995 by Inkscape. It was a collaboration with a band called The Residents, who are this American avant-garde group who, interestingly, they say they're not musicians, but they got into. They say they're not into musicians, but they got into music because that was their preferred way to tell their stories. And then when the advent of the CD-ROM came out, and there was this lovely thing about music being on CD, CD-ROMs on computers, there was this lovely sort of marriage between the two things. Groups like The Residents sort of took the bull by the horns and started creating these crazy sort of interactive drama experiences. Again, I think this is great because actually I think it does frame the character interestingly within the game. Which you'll see in a second. So it's basically set on this freaky carnival called, it's the Midway. And what you effectively do here is you exist behind the eyes of characters, and you can sort of push them in directions and read their thoughts, but that's pretty much all you can do. What you can also do is when you see other characters, you can swap between their point of views and then push them in certain directions and read their thoughts. And basically by seeing what's going on in their heads, very freaky. By seeing what's going on behind their heads, here you go, there's this really great bit here. Way! Through his eyes. But actually what's nice about this is, that's pretty much said, okay, you as the character are behind this person's eyes, you've got these thoughts down here, and yeah, in a Mist-esque sort of style, you're pushing them around the carnival. Yeah, it's very, really, really worth playing if you like freaky stuff. But what they've done is, what was interesting is the whole thing's based on a timer, and time moves in the carnival. Now, time doesn't move in the carnival in a 1 minute passes and 1 minute passes in their time. There's a sort of, the way time is transposed is partly based on seconds passing, but also based on events happening. So, you know, if you go to a certain place, that might actually shunt the time forward 1 hour. And the reason they did this is, what they have is a timeline of world events. And world events happen whether you like them or not, and you just happen to be behind somebody's eyes thinking certain things at the point that that happens. And the whole thing is just, it's a bit of I think it's a bit of a masterpiece. You can play it again and again and again, and you find out all these different story threads. They've also, interestingly, it was released as an album. So it's an album of songs, so you can actually experience this whole thing through the music. And they've also written it as a book recently. Which is a really, really well written book, but again, it just shows the, sort of, the quality of the storytelling which was going on. The other one, which I won't show you much of because I'm very aware that these things eat up a lot of time, is another Inkscape game called The Dark Eye, which the premise here is the designer wanted to create a game around the works of Edgar Allan Poe. So what he did is he took a selection of his work and embodied the characters and their stories into this house that you happen to visit. Okay, there's some sort of conceit as to why you're visiting this place, but actually there's no on-screen sort of user interface apart from the ubiquitous at the time disembodied floating pointing finger. But it's nice because it's just a pure exploration and discovery game. And again, it's a story. That works really, really well.
I suppose you're the young master Mr. Aldrich waits for. Go ahead on in.
I'm just going to let it run until the bit where an actual hand comes alongside the disembodied hand because it's the greatest.
There you are. You haven't just come. It's exceedingly dangerous to traverse the coast this time of day.
So most of the dialogue is actually just lifted from.
I'm so glad you came. I find that the pleasant company of my relations calms my nerves.
This is the problem with the disembodied hand. If you ever show your own hand, it looks like you. What's going on there? There you go. And let me just restart this. So those ones. There's Kentucky Route Zero as well, which I think is really interesting, which is a newer game. I went for an indie one rather than pulling out some of the ones. I don't know if anyone's played this. It's a really interesting conceit. I mean, on one hand, it's just a point-and-click adventure game of a very old-school sort of way, like the Monkey Island type approach. On the other thing, there's some really interesting gameplay mechanics. Okay, so they've embedded choice in what he says, although it doesn't really change the character and what you say. What it just does is explores a different aspect of that character's personality and the way he says it. But the best thing they've done here is his sidekick is a dog, and he speaks to the dog. Now, what's really interesting for people who've got pets is often you say things to pets you wouldn't say to a human. You'll often actually just say what's in your head to a pet, whereas often you wouldn't just say things which are in your head to another person in fear that they might think you're absolutely insane. But generally pets don't think you're mental. So the fact that he speaks to his dog actually gives a really good way for you to start understanding this guy's backstory and what he really thinks. And actually I thought that was just such a beautiful, and whether it was deliberate or not, just a beautifully realised mechanic within a point-and-click adventure. I just thought it was worth seeing as an experimental form. And of course, experiments form aren't restricted to games at all. There's I haven't got the time for these slides, probably because of time, but we've got the notion of some of the buckets waiting for Godot there, where its experimental form was, I suppose, complete minimalism as far as stage design, characters, and the absurdity of the actual content which is being reflected upon at any one point. Anyway, you've also got the on the right is the scene tree for Alan Ayckbourn's Intimate Exchanges play, which I think it was 1984 as well, where he wrote this. Basically, he only had access to 2 characters, and he wanted to create something which could utilize these 2 characters and also create something which would bring audiences back time and time again to the same thing. So he got this idea that each night he would just do a different strand of what ifs, and at each junction there's a decision that one of the characters has to make, and all the decisions are sort of on the sort of knife edge of what that character would or wouldn't do. So for instance, the very first decision is whether Celia Teasdale, who's one of the main characters, has a cigarette or not before 6 o'clock. So she's trying to quit smoking, she's had a hellish day, the cigarettes are in front of her, does she have one or not? Which is a legitimate sort of choice. And if she has one, she misses the doorbell. If she doesn't, she gets the door. And that itself starts this cascading sort of array of choices, which is beautifully written. In fact, if you ever want to see a really great example of branching narrative, look at this play, because Alan Ayckbourn is a wordsmith extraordinaire, and it is every strand is brilliant. Obviously, cinema, you've got the man with video camera. Actually, I've been to other writers' sessions before, so I know a lot of this is sort of been covered. But you've got man with video camera, just very early, 1908 or was it 1920? And then also things like 2001, which started to establish these incredibly wide, long, lingering shots, which almost felt uncomfortable, which again sort of broke a lot of cinematic practices. And then in literature, we have a whole load of experiments in form. I mean, literature is actually really progressive, and they've been doing this for yonks. You know, you've got The Unfortunates at the top, P.S. Johnson, which is a book in a box. So what they do is they just give you a bunch of sheaves, they give you the beginning and the end, and how you read the stuff in the middle is entirely up to you. We've got Tree of Cones here, which is basically a book which has been cut out of another book. So he's taken an original text and he's cut out all the words he doesn't want, and that the end result creates this new work. You've got House of Leaves down here, which uses the very shape and form of the page to sort of change the way the storytelling's done. And you've got this new J.J. Abrams book, is it called S? It's called S, which basically relies on the story being told through the annotations of a library book, which is quite interesting. It's a conversation between 2 people who keep taking the book out and putting in things. So you open it up and it's all this beautifully sort of handwritten sort of conversation going on, plus loads of sort of material, physical objects as well. So all these change the reading experience from what we traditionally know. So the parallel is what we traditionally know in a gaming sense. How do we experiment in a form to create new stuff? And that leads on to what I did with the 39 steps and the digital adaptation of it. So for anybody who hasn't seen that, there is a trailer, so I'll play that again. It'll give me 5 minutes, or 2 minutes, not just so that's good.
Richard Hannay, you have got into the wrong ditch, my friend, and you had better climb out.
Hey, can I speak to you? Pardon. I'm a bit rattled tonight. You see, I happen at this moment to be dead.
What does it feel like?
So the idea which drove that was the idea of taking a story which exists within the pages of the book and effectively trying to reinvent the way that's told to sort of make it a more multimedia, multi-sensory experience on games platforms. The big questions to me was, could we create a product which focuses on story or gameplay? Well, sort of, and importantly, while delivering something which was cohesive and actually made sense, people who got the end would actually understand what it was about, but also which we played all the strengths of the interactive media, you know, everything we were saying before about the notion of control and influence and stuff like that. And the other big question was, is there a market for this sort of form of storytelling? Will anybody actually buy it? You know, I pre-canvassed my family and realised I'd probably got about 6 sales in the bag, but you know, I probably needed a bit more to justify doing this thing. And also, once that is, what does the audience profile look like? Hopefully at the end of these slides you won't just see a picture of my dad. So, creative approach I took was effectively this. This is a mince grinder. I didn't actually have one, but it was quite a representative image here. So you basically take the book, put it in this grinder, and just spit out everything which comes out of it. And you know, what I didn't want to do is rely on any of the sort of formatting, the physical formatting of the book itself. Ultimately, why would I'm trying to move it onto a different media platform. You know, my gripes with ebooks and stuff like that is that, you know, the evolution of the book surely isn't just putting the page under a screen. I sort of used to compare it with the notion of, you know, like the birth of cinema. You know, everybody's sitting there and the lights going down, the curtains opening, and a page of a book just being projected on the screen, the audience collectively putting up their hands once they've read it, and then the page turning and you see the next one. I stopped using that analogy, although I still use it, because a few people said to me, that sounds absolutely amazing, we should do it. So you know, that's what it is. So yeah, so you take the book, you grind it up, you extract what is in that book. So what we were doing is, I was looking through the book. The first thing we did is thought, when's this book set? Where is it set? Okay, it's 1914, predominantly London and Scotland. Okay, so set your researchers off what was happening at this time. We started to look around the story. Okay, so what was happening around there? Okay, you had the suffragette movement going on. Obviously, you had the outbreak of the lead up to the outbreak of the First World War going on. You had all these other cool stuff though. You had like this amazing biplane race which went between France and England every year, and actually happens during the story of the 13 Steps. And the greatest thing is, when I was looking at all this stuff which was happening around what was happening in the actual core narrative of the story, there was this other amazing story about this pilot called Gustav Hamel, who was he was like the ultimate biplane flying sort of, you know, guy, pilot. And he was undefeated up until this year, when Richard Hannay is escaping up to Scotland, and incidentally reading the paper and following what's happening about him being chased for being the Portland Place murderer. A couple of columns along, people would have found out that Gustav Hamel hadn't heard the bad weather reports which had cancelled this race across the channel, but he went for it anyway. Well, I suppose that he's the only person in the race, probably stood quite a good chance of winning that. Yeah. Unfortunately, he was never seen again. And there's this whole mystery about what happened to Gustav Hamel. And I just thought, oh, that's amazing. So actually, the world that this story contains actually contains so many other cool things as well. And so the idea of setting the story or resetting the story in the world that was once conceived really excited me. So we pulled out the time thing. Then I also started thinking, okay, so what are the references? So there's loads of like obviously visual references in books, classic books. Classic books are interesting because often visual references don't make much sense to the modern reader. So when we were doing some tests with sort of Wuthering Heights, it was making references to box beds and clothes presses, and I was saying to people, do you know what they are? And they're like, oh, no. So I was just thinking, well, they're projecting these rooms with blank spaces in them, so they're not actually getting a decent depiction of what the author was originally thinking when they wrote this. So when it says in the 39 Steps that, you know, Richard Hannay was having a tall drink in his gentleman's club in 1914, I mean, how many people reading this actually can project that the setting of the story? So I thought it was quite interesting. Maybe there is a way to legitimize us taking the setting information from the book and actually using that as a storytelling canvas as opposed to the page. Equally, sounds, you know, the bell chimes 8, well, you know, sounds very good way of sort of bringing about emotion and atmosphere. So we thought, well, let's take out the sound data. So what we started doing is we started to extract the audio and the visual references and the world references from the book. And what we were left with was characters and actions. And we left the words to describe characters and actions, but set in this audio-visual sort of landscape. So yeah, break down, reconstruct. The top level we had a navigation system, we had some collectibles. I'm going to rush through this because I've only got 10 minutes. Yeah, so they end up looking a bit like this. So you've got, this is, that somewhere in London. So what we did is, yeah, we had a depiction of London in 1914. There's the sounds of like horse-drawn buses being pulled along the roads and stuff, and down with rain. We'd use the phrase "I returned from the city" on that May afternoon and pretty well discussed it with life. So the combination of the words and the audiovisual materials sort of created a new sort of sensory sort of thing in the brain. Because we were using location as a storytelling canvas, we thought, wouldn't it be cool to actually let people poke around these locations, have a look? If this is a room and there's a map on above the fireplace, why don't we let people have a look at that map? Or if there's some newspapers in the rack, it'd be quite interesting to see what's going on there. All just adds this extra dimension to the sort of well-known story of the 39 Steps. So we started to create artifacts which could be found within the context of these locations. And then we also thought, well, there are aspects of the book where a speed reader might skip. Or actually, there are aspects of the book where if you boil it down to just its core narrative, aren't particularly necessary, but some people might find them really important and want to discover them. So what we actually did is we streamlined the experience a bit by putting in these discovery mechanics where when you came across Richard Panic for the first time, you could just accept him for what he is through the few words he'd said and just move on. Or you could sort of start to explore his past, which again, had all been mined from the book anyway. So it was ways to sort of distill the book in different ways. And the great thing was, as well, as we worked with sort of archive providers to really fill this with legitimate images. So there's that's the Boer mine, and it's absolutely insane in South Africa. And actually, it really started to make things feel big and real, and I say just much bigger than what I would necessarily get from just reading the book itself. We gave elements of player choice. I mean, to be fair, the notion of player choice in this is pretty limited, in as much as it's more about how much do you want to know, how much do you care. There isn't really branching narratives. You can't change the story in any meaningful way, but what you can do is you can discover more of the story than you would be able to otherwise. We also dramatized all the dialogue, so even though we didn't explicitly show characters, so most of our locations are empty, but you can hear stuff. When there was specific dialogue moments, we worked with the Citizens Theatre Company to basically bring all the characters to life through vocal performances, and we used this sort of ghostly sort of apparition sort of process just to give a sense of where the characters are in the room and gestating in a way that would reflect their sort of emotional bias. And then the other things we did is we created a series of animated backstories. So when a character told a story within the story, we thought we could break our own rules, and we looked into what was a sort of popular media type in 1914, and we had the birth of sort of stop frame animation. So we created these sort of animated vignettes of when Richard Hannay was making up these yarns about what he did at certain points in his life to various characters. And they were quite nice. Again, they just broke up the experience of it as well, which we found an important aspect. And we also attempted this point of view thing. Obviously, in cinematic terms, the point of view is an incredibly powerful tool. Actually, the notion of being put behind the eyes of a character is, mind-blowingly sort of, powerful. Interestingly, most games do that as a matter of course, but then we've discussed earlier how that sort of causes all manner of issues. There aren't many films which presuppose that you're constantly behind the eyes of the characters, unless you happen to be the pre-recorded material in a video cassette or something like that, like Blair Witch. So what we did is we occasionally put you through the eyes of the characters in a John Malkovich type thing and gave you a set of sequences. The purpose of these was to let you interact with this other world, this magical world, this 1914 world. So we'd originally had all these sort of old cylinder record players and stuff which you could sort of touch and manipulate, and we really liked that because it sort of brought this other world to life. But that was possibly the most criticised aspect of what we did. Fair enough. I think the reason it was criticised is it sort of gave the illusion that there was going to be a gameplay element here, where it wasn't. It was just purely it was a different way of interacting through a sequence. So that's quite an interesting sort of output of that. So the market for this, just quickly, and I've only got 2 minutes. So we decided, it was mentioned before, you've got risks in mechanics, but you've also got risks in your audiences. Who are they? So how do we reach an audience who we don't actually know exactly who they are? We've got an idea of who might buy this, but actually what you don't want to do is put all your eggs in one basket. So what we decided to do is just make a multi-platform. So it was desktop, Windows OS, Linux, and also iOS. We did have an Android version as well, but there's all manner of complications with putting product on Android at the moment, and it actually happened. And we decided to go through multiple points of sale as well, so we had the app stores, and we had Steam, we had a whole load of digital channels, and we also released it as a box product. And in total, we shifted around 40,000 units. RRP was $9.99. The platform response was actually incredible. And people think, like, what is the market for interactive storytelling? Well, I think what I would say is, as far as the audience is concerned, you've got early adopters, I'll go on to that slightly, but you've got early adopters who will eat you up. But the early adopters themselves aren't enough to justify the application of interactive storytelling. You know, they will give you a spike, they probably won't cover your development costs, or at least they won't justify making a business. The platforms, on the other hand, go, whoa, this is brilliant, this is the future. You know, they're thinking, their mind is shooting off and thinking, we need to differentiate ourselves. We need to realise that games platforms realise that they've got the games community tied up. Where's the growth for the games market? Well, the growth for the games market is in non-gamers. What do non-gamers want? Well, something which is ostensibly non-game, or at least something which is story-infused, which is the sort of, story is a massive market, dominant entertainment market. So Steam didn't make us go through the green light procedure which they push most games through. They said, yeah, we'll just take that, and then they started flagging us up on their homepage. The app stores flagged us up for 3 weeks solid on the OS X and the iOS app stores, which was amazing. So that was great. The reviewer response was bizarre. Some people were like, yeah, this is brilliant. People were like, this is awful. Most of the really bad reviews came from the cultural press. I mean, I'm sorry to say this, but it's true. So the Times Literary Supplement were like, why are they doing this to the book? This is an outrage. They've turned it into this slow, plodding, meaningless piece of rubbish. And then other people are going, this is brilliant, I haven't felt anything like this for young, I'm in a different place here, this is beautiful, this is atmospheric, this is something completely different. Now, I think the difference in this, I think there's something in here a little bit about, the book market, whether you love them or hate them, they're constantly scared that people are trying to kill them. And there's this sort of, so I think when something comes out and says, we've taken a book and we've done it slightly differently, I think there's a slightly knee-jerk reaction as to, well, it's not as good as the book. And you know what, maybe it's not, but it's not meant to be in direct competition with the book, it's an adaptation of a book, and the same as a film is. A lot of the 5 stars came from the game community, which is good, because actually, when you look at our sales, most of our sales came from the game community. Now, I don't think this is reflective of our press results. It doesn't really, nowadays, especially for the indie market, what you get reviewed on doesn't necessarily translate to your sales profile straight. I mean, for the AAA games it does, you've got to get 8, 9 out of 10s for it to go through. But indie market, people just generally sort of buy into the notion of the innovation going on here. But actually, 72, like 3/4 of our sales came through sort of PC gaming routes. The boxed is orange, that was PC. It was sitting in shops like Morrison's and stuff, so I was trying to tap into the casual games market. But if you sort of add, the miscellaneous digital, which is interesting, this is Steam, this is the rest of the digital download market. But yeah, I mean, the App Store was 90% of tablets. A lot of companies just go, oh, we're doing this and we're only releasing it on iOS. Well, if you're doing that, you are ostracizing, I would say, 91% of your potential market. So it's worth thinking about that. I have to say that there was a bundle sale in there, which is basically like a get 8 games for the price of 1 type thing. So if you take the bundle away from the Steam thing, it slightly shifts the sales profile. But still dominated by the games market. And I wouldn't put this away, so apologies about the pictures and what it is or where it came from. So what we thought is the product we were making might appeal to readers and non-readers, gamers and non-gamers, lapsed gamers, which are basically people who were originally bought the ZX81s and the Commodore 64s, the people in the 80s who bought the home computing technology and didn't migrate onto consoles. You've got all these sort of people who are probably in their 40s and 50s who were once gamers in inverted commas but now don't, so this is a big market. and casual gamers. So we thought we could potentially get all that. So who were the dominant market? Well, as I say, realistically, the early adopters were our 18 to 35-year-old male skewed players, and I think that should possibly influence our notion of interactive storytelling. If we're going to write an interactive story, okay, I find it really, really compelling to think I'd love to make Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind as a game. However, possibly I'm missing the demographic who's going to be buying this. I think I'm probably much better at creating a Blade Runner or an Aliens if I'm trying to crack the interactive storytelling market initially. And then what's next for me? Well, I'm doing this thing called Framework 7, which is basically an innovation platform which you should all see kicking about soon, which you can all be part of. And basically, the secret experiment itself is just churning out and creating all these ideas, experiments, and form. And what we're going to be doing is we're going to be opening up almost the laboratory for that to communities, for anybody to download the app, actually come in and play with some of the stuff we're doing. And we don't really ask for anything from that other than the data of your play cycle, so we know what you're doing and what works and what doesn't. So yeah, that's me, and that's part of it. Thank you.